Catching Up with Philip Japikse.
The Azure and Devops podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using the latest in .NET, Azure, AI, and DevOps. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. The show is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a full-service software architecture and engineering firm. Find them at www.clearmeasure.com. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. I'm excited for our returning guest today on the show. Was on the show last in episode 296, talking about migrating from .NET Framework to .NET 8. Philip Japikse is our guest today. He's an international speaker. He's a Microsoft MVP, ASPInsider, MCSD, PSM II, PSD, and PSDNT. All his acronyms, and a passionate member of the developer community. He's been working with .NET since the first betas were released many, many moons ago. He's developing software. He's been doing that for over 40 years, and he's heavily involved in the Agile community since 2005, as well as being a professional Scrum trainer. Phil has taken over the best-selling Pro C# books from Apress Publishing, and that includes Pro C# 10, and he's also the president of the Cincinnati .NET Users Group, which is cinnug.org, and also the Cincinnati Software Architect Group. He founded and currently runs the CincyDeliver conference, which is coming up, CincyDeliver.org, and he volunteers for the National Ski Patrol. And during the day, Phil works as the CTO and Chief Architect for Pintas Mullins, and he always enjoys learning new tech and is always striving to improve his craft. So, Phil, welcome back to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. You're a multi-time guest on the show, and we'll make sure to include links in the show notes to the past episodes. But for the listeners who are just joining the podcast and kind of hearing you for the first time, I always like to back up. And you mentioned that you've been developing software for over 40 years now, so you got a couple of gray hairs, only on the sides, and you got lots of experience. And we have lots of young developers listening. If you were to kind of go back in time, what keeps you jazzed up about programming?
So for me, I always look at this. I'm going to say always, because probably not all the way back to the 80s, but my philosophy about software engineering is our one mission is to make our user lives better, right? Now, whether that's make their job easier, increase revenue, decrease costs, whatever, we're not a profit center. I mean, Microsoft, they're building software to make money off of it, right? We build software for our users, right? So we're not really a profit center. And what gets me jazzed about doing software and why I'm still doing it, I'll probably never retire, is solving those problems, right? To be able to hear the pains that one of my users is going through or the groups and go, you know what, I can make that better, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can, and then, hearing from them, oh my gosh, this tool is great, right? We were spending weeks doing this thing. We built an Excel compare tool, for example, which seems really silly. But they were literally taking two different spreadsheets, one from 2 weeks ago and one from today, put them up on each monitor, and you can't see my hands because of the background, and with a ruler looking at each one. And there were thousands of records because this is, they're looking at case statuses. And so I built a tool that would just run through. They upload 2 Excel files, and it shows you all the records in one but not the other, and vice versa. And then all the records are changed. Right. And so now what used to take them weeks to do, they can do in an hour. Right. And it'll export the differences, and they can go through and do it. And it seems like such a small, silly thing, but I get the most accolades from the users for that. Like, never mind all the things we're doing for the case management software for intake, but those types of things. And the fact that I can brighten somebody's day like that and make their job more efficient, that helps me get up in the morning.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, for context, there's lots of companies that we hear about that are pure tech companies that are selling tech products, and being an engineer for those companies is a certain type of experience. And then you've got all of the consulting companies that do outsource project work, and working in one of those companies, my company is one of that. That's a certain type of experience. And then working inside an IT department for a company that does something other than tech, that's yet another type of experience. And all of us are writing code, but our worlds are kind of different in that way.
Yeah, and I think the biggest change for me, because I ran consulting companies for many years before I took on this role. Actually, I started in 2019 with a law firm in a consulting CTO role before I came on full time. And the biggest difference I have, so it's the same overarching goal, right? Customer calls you in your company to solve a problem, right? We want to make this better. We want to increase revenue, decrease costs, whatever it is, right? Be more efficient. And so as a consultant, we go and do that, right? But then we leave, right? And if we do a good job, they might have us back or things like that. But it's very different when you're writing for something that you're going to have to support the rest of your career, right? And it shouldn't be, but inherently it is, right? Because, when you're building for a customer, right? And I'm sure you all do a great job, and you're highly respected in the industry, but there's a little extra oomph that you put into it when you go, you know what, 2 years from now, I'm going to have to remember what I wrote and why I wrote it, right? And that, it's very different when you come back and you go, who wrote this stuff? And you look at the commit log and you go, oh, that was me, right?
Yeah.
Now I got to go clean it up.
Right.
But yeah, and at the end of the day, we're solving problems, and that's what I believe tech should do. And even the software giants that are building software, they're still hopefully building tech that makes people's lives better, right? We could argue the ribbon bar in Excel, that whole fiasco, but they're, Microsoft, all of them, Gang or whatever they're called these days. It's still, trying to make our users' lives better, and that's why I do what I do, and that's why my team does what it does, right? Because we're very tied into the business. We're not working in a vacuum. And one of the nice things that we have, and it's just worked out really well, is I have full support from the partners to run software the way I think it should be run.
Your management.
And that means that I've got product owners, right? And they came from the business, right? They're not engineers. We didn't hire them from some random, Indeed listing. We promoted them from within. And so they know the business, right? They know what people are going through on a day-to-day basis. And they are meeting with the business at all times. We also have, every time the product owners are meeting with somebody in the business, we also have somebody from engineering in the same meeting, right? So we're not playing the telephone game. Right, so that we know what we're building is the right thing. And that's really cool, right, when you see that come to fruition.
Yeah. You mentioned these roles, and you and I both went through, from the start of the Agile Manifesto until now, all the different progressions of, hey, what kind of roles should be normal and necessary in a software team, and which ones are not? And you mentioned product owner, and I was thinking of when the one time that where I built a house and actually hired an architect to draw some plans, a civil architect. My wife hired an interior designer, and then we had the foreman of the builder, and I can relate just that right there to different skill sets that we use in a software team. Not necessarily because the work is similar, but because we're people. And yeah, we might do techie stuff to make the software do what it's supposed to do, just like in the building industry, you gotta build things a certain way so that the house functions properly. But making decisions for how should it be, I found a lot of similarities.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. I mean, if you think about user experience, right? That is not just an engineer. That's not just a software discipline, right? If you build, perfect example, when we got our house, to continue with the house, there was a closet door in the main bedroom that both the doors opened this way. They're closets opposite each other, and you couldn't have both doors open at the same time.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And so we actually changed them to be pocket doors, but somebody didn't use the thing that they built. Right. They're like, oh, we need a door. Okay, boom. Oh, we need a door here. Boom. And nobody kicked the tires. Nobody went, wait a minute, how does this work?
Right. Yeah. And the testing, and we had cabinets that were coming together in a corner, and you looked at it and it was awesome. But then when you actually put them in the corner, well, part of it was covered up because you had to have a dead space in the corner, and that wasn't represented on the drawings, and nobody thought of it. We're like, oh, great, what do we do now? So that it all happens in software, but being embedded in the business, so many times I've seen people talk about going fast, but if we could be going really, really fast, but if we make an assumption that's wrong and we work and we spend, a week or longer than that going in a direction based on an assumption, it turns out that assumption is wrong, we're not going fast.
Yeah, perfect example of that. So it's not in my bio anymore, but I used to be a firefighter paramedic. I'm still a paramedic with the ski patrol, but I actually worked with the township here, and they were rebuilding one of the main roads, not a highway, but one of the main roads, a state route. And different municipalities were responsible for different parts of it. And they were widening it from just a 2-lane road to a 2-lane with a suicide lane. And if you don't know what that is, that's the turn lane.
The double turn lane.
The double turn lane. And they were ahead of schedule. Everything was going great. And the county part ended here. The state part ended here. So they missed.
Yeah.
So they actually put a gravel S-turn in until they could buy the other land. And so now it's a 5-lane road, right? So it's got 2 lanes on each side with a the double turn lane in the middle. Because
that's expensive.
People can see. How do you fix that, right? They went fast, but they didn't do it right.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's, I'm not a fan of this move fast thing. I think you should be efficient, right? And you're most efficient when you're building the right thing. And if you just hear somebody say, I want this, and you go build it, and you build it fast, and you're like, well, that's not what I really meant, right? How many times have you talked to a customer and they say, I want X, and it's okay. Let's talk about that. Let's decompose it, right? What do you really want? And of course, you don't say it that way because they're like, well, I just told you what I want. But when you get into the details, it turns out that they didn't really ask for X. They wanted Y, right? And that takes that discussion and being embedded in the business and having that rapid feedback loop where we can do, a prototype. And we do a lot of flow charting in Figma. And Figma is just what we chose. I'm not
a diagram
promoting, Figma over Mural or anything else, but it's just what we use. And we found it very beneficial, especially when you're dealing with the partners who have very limited time to meet with us. So when we do meet with them, and we get what they're talking about, we diagram it. And we're not writing any code at this point, right? We're literally diagramming the business rules. And then that way, when we come back to them and say, here's where we left off, we don't have to spend a half hour reading notes or meeting minutes or things like that. It's like, here's where we left off. And they can see this visual representation of what they're asking for. And they go, oh, that's not what I wanted, because they've had time to think about it. And that makes us a lot more efficient, right? And by being efficient, that makes us faster.
Mm-hmm.
We've gotten to the point of where we release. So we have 4 opportunities a week to release. We don't release on Fridays because I like people to have their weekends. But Monday through, and we don't release for holidays. So obviously last week was a short week for those in the US.
Yeah.
But we release potentially 4 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And what we have on our Scrum call is our product owners will go through where we are, if they want to do a release, what would be in that release, if it's worthwhile doing a release. And just by releasing that fast, right, we're getting that feedback, right? We're getting that rapid feedback, and they're coming back and saying, yeah, tweak this a little bit, or, and we feature flag. And if for those that don't know what feature flags are, basically you just have a flag that says, have this in staging and have it in development, but turn it off in prod.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we'll go through with the business and say, here's what we've built so far. And again, when they see that, right. So I used to do wireframes, but I find wireframes to be, let me back up. I 100% think that if they're complex business rules, you should flowchart them, right? Because now you have them documented. Now you have people who are telling you the rules can go back and look and affirm it or deny it, right? That's not what I meant, type thing. Wireframing I used to do a lot, and I'd show them, but now we build it, right? And we feature flag it, and it's just a UI, and it's not fun. We haven't put all the guts into it to make it work. We're like, hey, is this what you imagined? That's close, but I really, now that I see it, right, I want this over here, and I'm sure you probably went through that with the house, right? Well, you did with the cabinets, right?
Oh, of course.
These cabinets look great. Oh, wait a minute, they don't actually fit in the corner, right?
Yep.
And if you could somehow get, I don't know, cardboard cutouts or something to say, here's what they look like, and you can move them around. And I know people have done this with furniture, right? Little models of furniture, and they move it around. And I wish I would have thought of that, because every time my wife wants to rearrange the living room, right, I move the couch 17 times and we end up right back where we started.
With a sore back.
Which is not efficient at all.
Right. Well, I like the way you emphasize efficiency. It made me think of, because I'm a race fan, and I was just watching the pro motocross race on Saturday, but that's a little bit niche. More people probably know about NASCAR or some of the other ones where drafting is necessary. And you can tell all the cars, they're all similar, similar speed, similar horsepower, but the ones that incur more friction go back in the pack. They get passed, whether it be wind friction or they lose a little bit of traction, they start wobbling and they slow down, they lose a couple positions, or they get some body work damaged and they're not as aerodynamic. And so it's not that they accelerate faster or they try harder. It's the avoidance of friction. And in motocross, even more, dirt bikes, jumping, there's the amateur dirt bikers, and I do amateur dirt bike racing myself. You can't just accelerate hard out of a corner. To go faster, you have to be smoother through the corner and avoid, hitting it wrong where you end up slowing down, and then you have to reaccelerate. And I think of that in the software world. You mentioned efficiency. I think about slow builds, or I have a merge conflict and now I got to stop and work on that, or bugs of any kind, or production issues where I got to stop and fix some production issue instead of work on the next feature. Those are all kinds of friction that hurt our efficiency. How do you guide your team? What do you think about when trying to make sure and measure your team's efficiency?
So we, what I inherited was a hot mess, and I likened it to when I came on in 2019. The entire place was burning down and the fires were out of control. From an IT perspective, the firm was very successful, and I was like kind of looking at the lay of the land, going, I don't know how you're successful. I honestly don't. You're successful in spite of the software, right? And everybody had, they're working in Word, instead of doing an intake in the app because it was more efficient. And they found it's not even shadow IT, right? Shadow processes to get around it. And one of the things that I have as a mandate, and I don't have a lot of mandates. I have very little rules as a manager, or as a leader. But one of them is we're not going to release bugs into production, and everybody wants to say that, right? But we haven't had to do a daytime release in a year and a half, right? And what I mean by daytime release is we release something, and oh crap, there's a problem
forced
in
release,
prod.
hotfix, yeah.
Yeah, everybody get out at 12. We'll let you know when we released it. And so to that end, I lean very heavy on the product owners, and they're awesome. They're probably, if not the best product owners I've ever worked with, two of the best product owners I've ever worked with. I'm very fortunate.
So great analysis skills.
Yeah. And I tell them, I mean, it's one thing they get it wrong. I don't really think that's a bug. Like, if we get it wrong, we'll fix it in the next release as long as there's a workaround. I'm talking about like a serious bug. And so any code that we work on anywhere in the system has a PBI around it, right? We don't do, I'm going to refactor this over here because I'm in here and it's a mess, right? You have to pick your battles, and that's hard. I just hired a new engineer, and he starts in 2 weeks. And I know what the first battle is going to be, he's going to be like, oh my gosh, this code is complete crap. I want to fix it. I'm like, no, you can't. You can only fix the code that has a PBI around it. Because then what happens is our product owners will go through acceptance testing on those PBIs, right? And, we have to document, here's how you test it, here's how you exercise it. And they go through that, and that's the quality metric they decide whether or not we're going to release. And if they're like, hey, these things aren't ready to release, we can release, but keep it in staging, feature flag it, or we're just not going to release tonight. And everybody, it's you make it work, you make it right, you make it fast, right? That's the pecking order that you have to do. And make it work is not good enough. Make it right is the bar that we set. Right? We'll make it fast later, right? Let's get it working right now. If it's a little slow, I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of cycles on performance testing because maybe it's fast enough anyway, right? And with that mindset, right, where I don't care what you're working on, you add a PBI for it, right? So that they know, hey, this area of the code changed, this report or this email that goes out or this screen has a change to it, even if it's just a refactoring.
Yeah.
Right? We've got PBI, so they know to exercise it. Right? And is it work? Yeah, it's a lot of work. But what's more work? Getting it right, or now having a production problem where you might have to go do a data cleanup and, deal with an outage during the day where you've got people sitting around, and our releases are fast. Even with the old web format, we can release in 30 minutes. And then that's extraordinarily long because all of our .NET code, and we talked about this on the last episode, our .NET code, .NET Core, but .NET, because Microsoft keeps changing the names. That's all pipelines. So it's really push button, do pull requests, and we release. We have continuous deployment over there. But the web form's a little more manual because it's web forms. But yeah, it's that quality and the pride in our work, right? It's one thing that I've instilled for years, and I'm really proud of how my team embraces it. It's not my code. It's not Jeffrey's code. It's the firm's code, right? They own the code. And, if I hear somebody saying nobody does, right? We had some instances with some new hires in the past. We're like, hey, Jeffrey, you broke this. No, Jeffrey didn't break it. We broke it, right? It's our code. And once you can get that instilled in the team where it's this collective ownership thing, then it's like, oh, this isn't working quite right. Well, let me fix it. Is there a PBI? No, there's not a PBI. Let me make a PBI. I noticed this when I was doing X, and we'll do that. And there's also discussion, right? A bug is only a bug if it affects the users. And what I mean by that is there might be 5 ways to do something. And 3 of them are kind of a pain in the butt, but they work. Right. And 2 of them we're trying to get down to 1 way of doing things. And we've got it. And it's pretty fast and it's slick, but it's problematic. Right. Is that something when we release it? Is that a bug that you have to do a hotfix for? And the way we handle it, and I didn't even come up with this, so I think it's brilliant, is every time we move a screen, so we're moving the web forms over to MVC5, eventually to .NET Core.
Mm-hmm.
And when we copy a screen from the old system to the new system, we label it experimental. Right? And it's got the same functionality or maybe better functionality, but we tell everybody, hey, this is experimental. Let us know if you find something. If there is an issue, the old screen's still there. Right? And this is the way we get this review to make sure that the new architecture is working and things like that. And so does the quality suffer? I won't say suffer is the right word, but we have time to do the make it right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, if we're dealing with the financial part of the system where there is no experimental, we're refactoring it, then yeah, it's just got to be right. And sometimes that will delay a release. And, the goal is not to release. The goal is to release the right software.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if we have to miss a few releases, there was a really big change that we did, and it took us 2 weeks to release. And it was actually funny. The culture of the firm has changed so much. They're like, hey, there aren't any release notes. Did I miss them? And we're like, no, we haven't released. We're doing this really big change. It's going to be a little bit. And so they're expecting these updates, 2-3 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
Did I answer your question? I feel like I answered your question, but I kind of went that way also, which is what I do, right? Give me a microphone.
Which is great. Which is great. Sitting at the feet of the master.
Yeah.
So, well, you mentioned the goal is not to release. The goal is to automate more work for the people who are trying to get work done. I mean, we're using computers to make work easier, less time consuming. That's kind of what we've been doing for decades and decades, right?
Right.
So
and it's only gotten better. So we can do more automation with that and program things in such a way that some of it is process engineering also, right? We have to, I think it was Einstein who said, we can't save tomorrow's problems by thinking the same way we think about today.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a horrible paraphrase, but it was something along those lines. And so what we have to do as engineers is not give them a faster horse, but go ahead and give them a car.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
When you're talking to your users, what do you want? Oh, I want this to be faster. Well, what if we, the Excel thing that I built, which only took me a day to build, and it's saving, it saved the firm months of human work.
Yeah.
Right?
But really, they want to process some data. They don't care about Excel. They need some data that needs to be processed and analyzed.
And it's like, when you look at what is the problem you're having? Well, I'm trying to get from A to B and it's taking too long. Well, let me give you this car or a train or a light rail, or even a bicycle, right? And something, and then we can iterate on that, right? Let's get this first thing.
So in the vein of automating and your product owners are kind of looking at the business and coming up with new ideas. Everybody's talking about it. What have the users and the managers at your company, have they been asking, hey, what should we use AI for? What else is possible? How have those conversations gone in your world?
So the conversations in the legal world are very different. How do I want to word this so I don't get hate mail? Attorneys need to be very, very careful about using LLMs.
Okay.
There's been a lot of cases, one in Chicago not too long ago, where an attorney filed a brief and used ChatGPT to write it and it had hallucinations, right? It was quoting case law that didn't exist. There was somebody recently, and I know we talked about it, Jeffrey hosts this wonderful software architect forum. and we were talking about somebody actually probably got paid $1 gazillion to write a paper for the government about responsible AI use. And that paper had a bunch of hallucinations in it. And so when you're talking about...
So inaccuracies, in other words.
Inaccuracies, yeah. So hallucination, if you're not familiar with it, you ask ChatGPT for 5 ways to do something and only 3 exist, it will still give you 5 because you asked for 5. It'll tell you, right? It'll, from a programming standpoint, it'll bring back methods that don't exist. It'll bring back, and even as far as Copilot has gotten, I use Copilot a lot. I really love Agent Mode, which just came out. But I was doing a refactoring yesterday, and it refactored and said, hey, use this method. Well, that method doesn't exist in the library I was using. And you call it out. You say that method is, oh, you're right. That doesn't exist. Let's try this other thing, right? So it's very, it owns it when you call it out, but you have to know to call it out. So when you're talking about case law, contract negotiation, there's a lot of things out there, but you have to be very guarded. What we're using AI for, it's another company set up by the son of the main partner, one of the sons, who's a software engineer, and he worked under me for a while, and I mentored him up, and now he's got his own business as working with the firm where we're using AI to automate the call process. Right. So it's an automated, chatbot, not a chatbot, automated agent. And for very basic case types. So we're in personal injury space, if we didn't make that clear. So let's say that you're calling about a Roundup case. You've used Roundup in the past. You have cancer. You think it might be related. And so you call. Well, Roundup and all the mass torts are very straightforward. Did you use Roundup? Yes or no? Did you use it between these years? Do you have this diagnosis, right? There's some very clear qualifiers for those types of mass torts. And if we can get... your screen just went black.
Oh,
that was really
hold
weird.
on.
It looks like you're playing with
pressed a button.
or something. So it was a total distraction.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that messed with the recording. So we'll cut that out. And you said if they use Roundup and some mass torts, so we can just start
so with
from
the
there.
mass tort, you can automate a lot of the process because there's not a whole lot of opinion that needs to be rendered, right? Camp Lejeune, Roundup, talc, hernia mesh, all these types of medical devices or environmental stuff. It's a yes/no set of questions. It's an algorithm, right? And you could program that, and we've done that with what we call the smart form, where it just goes through. We flow chart it, and then we program the questions. If you answered yes, go to this question. And now we're starting to use AI for a lot of that, right? Because it's something that you can program very clearly. The thing you have to watch out for and make sure that you do is not provide answers from that. You're really just gathering information, right? And if they say this, and go to that. And so instead of programming a bunch of if, then, else statements, right, you're programming the prompt library and the flow. And then the thing you need to be careful about is make sure that you program your agent that if it gets any inkling that this is going off the rails or it's something it can't handle, to say, hold on, let me connect you to a live agent. The other thing you have to do from a TCPA, and that's the Protection Act, Telephonic Consumer Protection Act, I think.
Okay.
Anyway, TCPA is all the rules that say you can't call all the illegal spammers, ignore it, but you can't call people who are on a do not call list. You can't email unsolicited, right? All these rules around it that the honorable people follow, the scammers ignore.
And the scammers just use non-US call centers who ignore it all.
Yes. But you have to identify that this is an automated agent, right? You don't have to say it's a chatbot or AI, but you have to identify it. And it's funny because I've gotten, a lot of spam calls recently, and I'll hear it.
You can tell.
Yeah. And so when they're pausing, I say, oh, you're obviously using an automated agent and you haven't declared it as an automated agent. That's a TCPA violation. I've recorded your phone number, and they hang up like that. Right? They just stop, right? Because they understand they're breaking on. The phone numbers are spoofed anyway, so there's nothing I can do about it.
Right.
So that's what I think, those manual, repetitive, repeatable tasks. I think AI, and we can talk all day about whether it really should be called AI or not, but using an LLM, with different models and agents, I think that is a great place for it.
There seems to be a few unique but new architectural elements, whereas it seems like we went along for a good number of years without some significant new architectural element. We had web applications, we have native applications, we had the cloud, but now you got the LLM, you got the open source ones, the commercial services, but we've got tools to register with. Now we've got MCP servers, we've got the vector databases, and vectorizing some data and put in there in the RAG pattern. How are you keeping it all straight, and how do you think about are there more AI related primitives than what I just listed?
So you did the White House reporter thing. You asked like a 5-part question. So we'll
yes or no, Phil? Yes or no?
Keeping it all straight is hard. I promote your webcast that you do once a month. I think it's coming up, maybe even tomorrow. Maybe it's coming up soon. There's a once a month thing.
The Architect Forum?
Yeah, Architect Forum that Clear Measure and Jeffrey hosts. And that's a great service. So, got a lot of software architects from around the world actually, dial in, and it's just a nice little forum for exchanging information. And I think you can find more information on clearmeasure.com.
Thanks for the plug.
And no, it's a great service that you provide. And that's one way, right? Talking to other people, right? Reading about them, I think, are problematic. If you go on LinkedIn, then everybody and their mother has solved all the problems. I haven't written a line of code in months because I've got vibe coding doing it all, and blah, 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 blah. And that's all. I'm going to say that's all bullshit, right? Maybe you need to edit that out, whatever.
No, it's not true. It's bunk. I mean,
yeah.
I haven't. And if anybody out there is actually figured out how to do that for real, come on the show and talk about it, because I haven't found a real person that's actually figured out how to do it to that extent. I think it's hyperbole.
So keeping up, you got to find peers that are experimenting and doing it, right? And you have early adopters who are typically the ones that have lost their hair because it's all got burned off. You got the late adopters who are like, oh crap, I need to get on the bandwagon. And then you got the people who are like, what is this thing? How can I play with it? But the biggest thing that I recommend to everybody, and I don't think people are saying it enough, it's not about how can I use AI, right? Because a lot of bosses, a lot of C-level people are like, oh, Bob at the country club using AI. We need to use AI, right? Find a use for it. And that's 100% the wrong approach.
Yeah, it's just a tool.
Right? It's just a tool. And so look at your processes. And there's something that I used to work for a software vendor, and I found it was most efficient. I still use this when I talk to the business, about what kind of features to build. It's like, what part of your job sucks the most? Right. And I'll ask them that, right? And working with a new business unit or something like that. And I used to do this when I was consulting all the time. And they'll tell you in no uncertain terms what they don't like. And that's where you start getting these ideas for how can we make this suck less?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then is that something that we can automate with an agent or with AI or things like that? I think that's the approach that people need to take. It's like, what process is bad? how can we make the process better? And it might not even be an engineering solution.
Mm-hmm.
It might literally be fix the process.
Yeah.
Right. And then look at what's out there with AI and start small. Because what people aren't talking about is this costs money.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, there's a bill associated with it when we use a LLM to process a phone call. Right. It's not free.
Right.
Right. I mean, nothing's free, but in the grand scheme of things, now you're paying for tokens. And now, this token usage, it's kind of like the early days of Azure. It's like, how much is Azure going to cost me? I don't know. Put it out there and look at the bill.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think I answered all the parts of your question.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I think about answering the question, because our clients ask me all the time, the theme that I answer with is that there's some new tools that are now in our tool belt. But like you, it's the same question. What sucks the most? What do you not like? What problem could we try to solve? And then we now, with an expanded tool belt, we process the question, how could this be better? How can we solve this problem? Yeah. And the answer may be a little bit different now that we have some new tools in our tool belt.
Yeah, 100%. Right. And it's, let's talk about Copilot, right? I am now a big fan of GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio. I don't use Visual Studio Code because of the web forms and everything else, but I know it's really strong there. Also, when Copilot first came out, it was an annoyance, right? The way that it injected itself into my workflow, and it was usually wrong. Like with refactorings. Oh, you change this one thing. I bet you want to change them all to that. It's like, no, I only want to do one. And I literally would beat the crap out of my escape key trying to get it to stop.
Yeah.
It's grown up, right? It's mature. It's really powerful. I will ask it questions like, I was working on some training. I do a lot of work with VS Live. And, I wanted to add in a new feature about XML serialization, which I haven't done in years, but somebody asked about it. So I said, well, let me be able to demo it. And I wasn't able to serialize my object model. And how long has it been since you've done XML, right? It's been a long time because everything's JSON or binary format like gRPC. And so I just put it in agent mode and I said, look at my object graph, starting with the car class.
Mm-hmm.
And make sure it's serializable.
Yeah.
And in agent mode, it said, cars has a link to drivers, has a link to radios, has a link to makes, right? And it walked that entire chain and said, I'm going to make these changes. I'm going to make these changes. Do you approve? Yes or no? And so now we have this much more powerful refactoring tool. And what I really like about it now, and I know we've had these conversations, for 2 years now, is it explains why. Mm-hmm. That was my biggest beef when Copilot first came out. It's like, well, here's a solution. And if you didn't know it was a bad solution, you might just take it, right? That's why I didn't like entry-level developers using Copilot in the beginning, because at least on Stack Overflow, you can see the upvotes and the downvotes, and you can see all the comments and everything else. Mm-hmm. But if you didn't know enough to know, it doesn't look right, it doesn't pass the smell test, then now you're injecting bad code. Right. And what Copilot does now in Visual Studio, and I think it does the same thing in Visual Studio Code, is it says, by the way, here's the change I would make if you let me, and here's why, and it explains it. And I think that's brilliant. I think that is so much more powerful because now it's not just doing your work. It's not just catching your fish. It's saying, I'm going to catch this fish for you, but let me teach you how to fish at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what makes it a really helpful tool as opposed to just vibe code, write everything, and I have no idea what you wrote.
Yeah. I love it in Visual Studio as well. And from what I've heard and other people I've interviewed, GitHub is making sure that it's the same Copilot, because it's just a VS Code plugin and a Visual Studio plugin, but it's the same. It's not like, does it work in one or the other, which I think is awesome. But I've been playing around with Copilot instructions .md. It's almost like the system prompt that it's like a pre-prompt for everything you give it.
Right.
And I said, everything you do, don't finish until you've rebuilt the solution and run the tests in this particular project, like run the fast tests. And if anything doesn't compile, try again. If any new test broke, try again. And because otherwise, what I as the user am like, oh, you're done? Oh, no, you're not. It didn't work. And it's not perfect. It sometimes gets hung up on running the process for the test, but it's getting better. And I can just imagine, a year from now, it's going to be amazing. It's gonna save us all so much time. I'm not worried about being out of a job, but I think the tooling is pretty cool already, but it's getting better.
Yeah, and along that, so I gave a talk for my user group last time on agent mode because yes, it's the same tool. It's just Visual Studio is slower to release it, right? So we finally get agent mode in the regular versions, and I just created a. It wasn't even GitHub instructor, Copilot instructor.md. It was just a text file.
Yeah,
and I literally said, build me a solution named this. I want it to be pinned to .NET 9. I want all of the code to be, I was in a repo with this, a brand new repo. I said, I want all the code to be in an SRC folder, create a project called models, create a project called infrastructure, create a project called web. That's, MVC, blah, blah, blah. And I gave it all these specifications and it built it.
Yeah.
And I said, well, my point when I was giving this talk is, I have batch files, command line files that we use, and I teach with the workshops where it does all this. And one of my attendees said, "Yeah, but Phil, you wrote all these books on C# and .NET, and you understand that, but I didn't even know you could do that from a batch file. And now if I can tell agent mode to do it, and to your point, to have it say, don't proceed until it builds and pass the test and things like that, I think that's." Because then I can just think stream of consciousness, right? I need to do these things, and have it go. I think it's powerful. I it's not perfect, but that's why you got to put the safety rails in there, right?
Yeah.
Don't continue until it compiles and everything else.
Yep. Well, I know we run long, but it was great having you back on the show. As we're closing. Is there any final thoughts that the listeners should hear before we wrap up?
I just remember that at the end of the day, it's not the tech, it's the user, at least for those of us in line of business. And whether you're consulting or whether you're working for, a firm or a company as in-house engineering, the goal of what we do is to make our users' lives better. And that's the reward.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always about the shiny penny. It's not always about, I have to use AI in 27 places, because really what makes my day and makes me happy is when I get a message on Teams from one of my users like, oh my God, this saved me so much time, right?
Yeah.
Or this is so much easier now. I love this new screen. And then I have a little skip in my step, right? Because that's a win, right? And we're doing this in MVC5. Right, in the old case management system, because it's web forms, and we talked about that in the last episode. And Jeffrey's going to put in the show notes. You can go back and listen to what fun that is going from web forms to. But yeah, if you can make your users happy, right? And Mads K with Visual Studio, right? He's got to talk now. It's like, how we are trying to increase developer happiness with Visual Studio. So Microsoft is like, hey, it's not about number of features. Can we make our users happier?
Mm-hmm.
And that should be our goal, and that's a win in my book. That's my opinion. You take it or leave it.
Nice. Well, Phil, it's so great having you back on the podcast. Thanks for hanging out with me.
Yeah.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. And until next time, dear listener, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure and DevOps podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Visit our sponsor, ClearMeasure, at www.clearmeasure.com. And on behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.